In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
Good day, everyone. Nestor Licanto here with another edition of In Full Zoom. And this week, we're going to talk a little bit about the PPP. That's the Paycheck Protection Program that the federal government has extended for a second iteration, and also the EIDL, which is the loan assistance. And joining us for that conversation is the branch manager for the Small Business Administration Guam office, and that's Ken Lujan. And we've got a couple of bankers with us. We've got Untalan of First Hawaiian, who is the current president of the Guam Banking Association, and of course, Flores, who is the president and CEO of BankPacific. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Good morning. Happy day.
All right. Today. And Ken, we're going to start with you because you're going to go through all 100 and plus pages of the guidance and tell us all about it.
I'll try my best to condense it down for you.
All right. No, actually, my first question is: tell us a little bit. Give us a little bit about what the Paycheck Protection Program is, very briefly, and what are the highlights of the new iteration that was just passed by the Congress.
Well, last year, sometime in April 3rd, I believe it was, as a result of the passage of the CARES Act, that allowed the SBA to provide financing to the lending institution, what's called the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program. And so that allowed many businesses here in Guam to avail themselves of the opportunity to get financing through the program with the assistance of our local lenders here in Guam. That has since terminated or expired. It expired in August 8th of 2020. And as a result, there were some monies that were left over on the CARES Act that was then reallocated as by virtue of this new law that was passed on December 27th, called the Economic Relief Act or Economic Aid Act, that now allowed the PPP to resurface for the second time and be available to the business community for any disaster relief because the pandemic still continued on. And so this particular program that's now in place, which we call the second draw PPP, will be expiring on March 31st of this year. So there are still funds available for businesses who are still undergoing disaster assistance. And in addition to that, they can now draw a second time, whereas the first provisions on the first PPP program only allow for one loan to be issued out per business entity. This time around, they can do a second draw now.
Okay. Are there any other changes to that other than allowing a second draw for those that are already in the program?
Well, there's been a lot of emphasis that has been given because of the fact that you have certain industries within the within the market that actually were affected the most, such as the food industry, the hotel industry, bars and restaurants have been closed, food truck services. I mean, they can now avail themselves of the opportunity to get more financing by a calculated formula that they use is 3.5 times the amount of their monthly payroll. Whereas just the regular service industry can go for 2.5 times the payroll amount. In addition to that, it also expands the expenditure costs that the businesses have been incurring. The first round of PPP was limited to payroll costs, utilities, rent, and it was kind of limited to that nature, but now they expanded it to operational costs, employee expenditure costs, such as insurance, life insurance, health insurance, things of that nature. And so that has made it available to the small business community. In addition to that, companies such as yourself, Nestor, the broadcasting companies, which are 501c6 regulated, chambers of commerce, say for instance, they can also be included into this whole formula and also draw down against this program too. So the eligibility factor has been expanded somewhat to allow more opportunities for more operations out there. So that's a good sign for it. And so it also gives them another injection of capital that the businesses need as a result of the second draw of this program.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
GU Self-Storage, conveniently located near the Harmon McDonald's. We offer affordable rates, online payments, and auto bill pay for your convenience. Plus gate access daily from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Call us today at 648-7867 for more information.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
Thank you. Appreciate your passing on that. It's making the media companies eligible, and I think we've already passed that on to our ownership. Before we get onto some further discussion, I wanted to ask Ed and Phil just to comment on the first iteration of the PPP. Then we'll get into the EIDL later. But what are your experiences with your customers that applied for PPP through your banks, and can give us some just anecdotal insight into that? And let me start with you, Ed.
The banks all, during the first round, started taking in paper applications, and that they were overwhelmed. We were inundated with thousands of paper applications. We quickly then started creating portals, but to be able to design portals to specifically address a lot of the nuances that came out from the SBA, and this was a product that was evolving. So as things evolved, as SBA found out certain things that they needed to make changes, we always had to improvise to be able to do that. The local banks here in Guam, and I think I'm including based upon the SBA reports, we did, I think Guam and CNMI, we did over 1,000 to almost 2,000 different loans to support our small businesses. The challenge that we had initially, of course, was everyone was, the first round, they ran out of money. Then they came out with the second funding, and everyone was panicking because they were afraid they were not going to be able to make it. And so the pressure on a lot of the banks, getting calls from customers, did you send it in? Did you complete this? Did you complete that? And I wish it was easy where you could easily go in there and just answer yes, no, do this, do that. But it required bankers to be able to touch these applications, to review the applications, to ensure that they were complying or not complying, or if there's any questions, because once we shoot it up to the portal, SBA portal, we want to have a high degree of probability that it's going to get approved or rejected because of the failure of not including information. So I'll be very frank, the first two rounds of the PPP was very strenuous on a lot of the business banking community, particularly trying to keep people patient, trying to be able to keep them calm and that the monies didn't run out. Ken noted that there was I think about $135 billion left, if I recall, Ken, just reading the reports, from the second funding source. And I think it's because a lot of people couldn't qualify, and so they just started pulling back. So now with this third round of PPP, that's where a nice big chunk of money is coming from. And I think what, all the other banks are doing right now are they're looking at their portals. They're trying to make sure they got all the nuances that the SBA is coming out with, et cetera. So, we're all sitting back waiting, and we're trying to push everything through the portals and not inundate the bankers directly, and hopefully they'll be electronically done and very seamless, if you may.
All right, Phil, did BankPacific have a similar experience?
No, we were not. It's not SBA's fault. They were just so overwhelmed with all the applications coming in the portal. We were not able to enter the portal, so we didn't participate in the PPP program. And likewise, won't be doing it this time either. But I can talk to you as a borrower, because we borrowed money. Some of our companies borrowed money from First Hawaiian and also from Bank of Guam, and we knew they were swamped. but both of them did a good job with us. And now we've had one of the loans, Guam Dry Cleaners. It's already been approved for being forgiven. We're waiting for the other companies to get the same from their banks. But we are going to probably, for at least one or two of the companies, participate in the second draw. We understand, of course, that those who did not receive the draw before, they're the front of the line. They're like the Manamco for the vaccination, which I got. But but I think this week, Ken would know better than I, but both those applying for a first draw and a second draw are now able to, will be able to apply this week. And Ed and I were in a chat this morning, and Ken Cook said that it opened 12 hours ago, but already $50 million has been committed throughout the state on this new program. So it should help out. And I'm glad, like Ken mentioned, that the food service industry, most industries, you can only borrow 2.5 months of payroll. They can go out 3.5 months of payroll because they are really seriously impacted by what's going on. I think we can all see that.
Right.
Yeah.
Ken, in the news release that I read, the SBA Administrator Jovita Carranza said that SBA has changed some things up in response to input from businesses. Can you elaborate on some of those?
Changes in terms of the way they do business, or?
Yeah, I think you mentioned, you said something about targeted relief, and I think you touched on that. You wanted to sort of encourage those businesses, particularly in the food and beverage and hotel and restaurant industries, to avail of the assistance.
Yeah, one of the things that we want to encourage, because again, the cries throughout the country, throughout the nation, has been that we couldn't avail ourselves the opportunity for this program because of the status that we were in. And so realizing that we've also allowed churches and religious organizations to undergo the program. In the past, they were not eligible. The first round, they became eligible. So now these 501c3s, the 501c6s, and so forth, they now have become eligible to the program. So that allows them the opportunity to get the financing that they need now. In addition to that, one of the things that we didn't experience here in Guam is the cost that was associated with the riots that occurred back in the States, because these businesses were affected by the riots. People protesting down the streets and breaking into their business operations. Those businesses that were affected by the riots are also eligible to add those costs in for forgiveness as well. Knock on wood, fortunately we didn't have experience that here in Guam, but the SBA has allowed these expenses to be included and become eligible for forgiveness opportunities. So we'd like to encourage the business community to look at these new changes to the regulations and new changes to the program, so that way they can include their expense costs that are eligible into the loan amount that they're going to be requesting on.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit now about the EIDL? I understand that that's sort of been extended until the end of the year.
Yes, the EIDL, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, expired in December 31st, 2020. Again, as a result of the enactment of the Economic Aid Act, that extended the life of the program to December 31st, 2021. They also provided additional funding for the disaster EIDL loan program to provide the aid that they needed to it. In addition to that, what SBA has done, and they did it last year and they're doing it again this year, SBA has deferred all principal and interest towards to March of this year. So in other words, any disaster home or business loans that are existing out there in the community, they don't have to necessarily pay for the loan until March of this year. So their next due date is going to be March of 2021. The one thing I advise and kind of counsel and want people to know, businesses that do have the disaster loans, or even individuals who have the disaster loans, although we are deferring the amounts, to a later date, interest still continues to accrue. So if you have the capability to make your payments, I advise that you do so, because what you want to do is you want to avoid a balloon payment towards the end of the maturity. So I don't want you to get surprised and call me up, 20 years down the road. Hopefully I'll still be with the SBA. But 20 years down the road and say, how come I have a balloon payment now? How come the last payment's now $2,000 compared to $200? And so that's one of the things. Another provision within the act that allowed good thing for the EIDL is that as part of the forgiveness process with the banking institutions, SBA required that whoever received an EIDL advance payment, that was going to be taken off or subtracted from the total amount of that they borrowed with the lending institution. That now has been repealed, and now SBA is going to reconcile the differences with the local lender who made the loan, and those monies will actually be forgiven. So that's an added plus. Now we don't have to take into consideration that becomes a loan dollar amount. So that's added relief to the business community as well.
I'm happy to hear that. Because I know we got the forgiveness of First Hawaiian, that EIDL was not included. So thank you very much, Ken.
All right, you're welcome, Phil.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
GU Self-Storage, conveniently located near the Harmon McDonald's. We offer affordable rates, online payments, and auto bill pay for your convenience. Plus gate access daily from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Call us today at 648-7867 for more information.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
And real quickly, Ken, just some advice for would-be applicants. They need to get all their stuff, their documents ready ahead of time, or is that something you're encouraging them, or the previous information that they had submitted for those that are going for a second draw? No need to add to that.
Well, some of the lending institutions are ready to take on applications. Some of them are not. So the advice I give, at least for this particular week, is review the regulations that are online within SBA's website. They're also online with the Treasury Department's website. Review the regulations, download the necessary forms that are applicable to you. If it's a second draw that you want to do, look at those forms. Those forms are very specific as to what the requirements are. Familiarize yourself with what the regulations call for, what the forms ask for. Prepare the documents, and then when you're ready for submission to the banks, you can go ahead and do so. But it'll be best that you prepare your documents and get it ready, because typically what happened in the first round of funding, a lot of the businesses that applied for the loans within the lending institutions that failed to provide sufficient information and was incomplete, the banks held it back and said, we're not processing it. You may have been the first one online, but you're going to be the number 100 person now, because 99 people before you had complete packages and yours wasn't complete. So again, word to the wise there, get your ducks in order, dot your I's, cross your T's.
Yeah. Okay, we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left, and I wanted to pivot because we did have some breaking news this morning about the pandemic unemployment assistance program, which you're not part of, though, Ken. But since we've got a couple of bankers here, I wanted to ask them about their thoughts on the fact that thousands of applicants or beneficiaries of the KUA will now be disqualified from the program. And so the feedback we're getting already is a lot of people are frightened by the fact that these checks will no longer be continued. Phil, let me start with you. What are your thoughts on that? And can you just give us a broader thought on the economic recovery?
Yeah, it surprised me when I heard that news, and I've just heard a little bit about it. I haven't really dived into it, but yeah, because if I'm working part-time, I still have full-time obligations like my rent, my utilities, whatever the case may be. So I'm wondering if some people are going to say, is it worth my is it worthwhile that I continue to work reduced hours, or I just go unemployed so that we get the checks? But it's going to be hard on people, and it surprised me when I heard that. I don't know if the new administration will change any of that. I don't know if the new administration will even affect the PPP or the EIDL, but I'm fortunate I'm employed, but if I'm partially employed, it's really bad news. I'm sorry to hear it.
Yeah. Ed, you got any thoughts on that?
You know, the one thing that we were happy to see, and I think this is from an overall banking perspective, is that a lot of these people who are unemployed were actually using their funds a little bit wisely rather than going out there and just, you know, buying luxury goods, etc. Although we did see some spikes in certain areas, they're actually working towards managing their obligations, etc. You know, if they are not able to continue on with receiving that assistance until the economy starts opening up, and then, you know, we could see some harder times. But hey, Nestor, if I could, I just want to make a few comments back on that real PPP real quick.
Sure.
You know what Ken had mentioned, that you know, this round 3, there's going to be a first draw, meaning people who didn't, or businesses that didn't apply, they're going to have that opportunity to apply. But the underwriting process, it appears it's going to be similar to the way it was when we first started. So, you know, like Ken said, he's encouraging them all to go into the SBA website. I believe a lot of the banks have links already to the portals. They need to go in there and start looking at the documentation that they're going to be required to submit. I also understand that I believe, and Ken, you can confirm, but there's a $10 million cap on that first draw. Whereas the second draw, the existing PPP clients, there's a cap of $2 million that they can possibly draw. And, you know, there's some sort of requirements, but it's going to be first draw, new guys come in, they're going to get that opportunity. Then the second draw. The one question that we're getting called up a lot about is the forgiveness of the first 2 draws or the first 2 issuances. And we've actually been holding back on trying to push a lot of customers with 150,000 and below, because it went from 150,000 that was going to be like a simpler approval forgiveness process down to 50. Now we believe it's about 150, and I think SBA is going to release that form out on the 20th, which will make it a lot easier for those who have existing PPPs below 150 to apply for forgiveness. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Good points. Yeah. And Ken, we're going to have to wrap it up with you. Go ahead and comment on that.
Yeah, I was going to say that, yes, because the forgiveness process has been somewhat slow because of the fact that they were waiting for SBA's guidance in terms of changes on the requirements of 150,000 and below. I'm glad to report that SBA will be making those changes, and so that way the flow of forgiveness process would be quicker, and to a point where we can close the documentation on that. So this is going to be an evolution that's going to be taking place in the next week or 2. Constant changes. So what we say today may change tomorrow. So the best thing to do is continually check with the websites, check with the SBA website, the Treasury website, update yourself with the updated information, because at the same time too, myself and the banking institutions are trying to interpret this as quick as we can. But one last thing in parting, I'd like to give big kudos to the lending institutions here in Guam who are participating and continue to participate with providing the disaster relief and providing the finances that we need for our community, because without them, the money's going to be flowing out there. So thank you to the bankers, thank you to the Guam Banking Association. Thank you for all your support, what you do with our programs as well.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
GU Self-Storage, conveniently located near the Harmon McDonald's. We offer affordable rates, online payments, and auto bill pay for your convenience. Plus gate access daily from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Call us today at 648-7867 for more information.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
Just before we go, Ken, just tell us your thoughts on the first round and whether or not you think more businesses should be able to avail of the second.
Well, I think we got a lot of businesses that actually applied for the loan and received monies from SBA. There was a total of about when we closed the SBA PPP program on August 8th, there was a total of 2,208 businesses that received monies from the SBA for a total of $192 million that was actually approved out in the community. I see that we're probably going to get a little bit portion that those numbers may not be as high as before because there's still some hesitation and apprehension on the businesses side. But at the same time, too, those who are familiarized with the program would then look at this and say, I do need the funds coming up in round 2, so I'm going to go for it too. I know the process, I know what needs to be done, and the banks have made it streamlined. SBA made it streamlined, so now it's much easier for me to go in there, knowing very well that I do still need the finances. So we encourage the bank or the business community to look at this opportunity and don't let it go by, because again, it ends on March 31st.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it, gentlemen. Ken Lujan of the SBA, Phil Flores from BankPacific, and Ed Untalan, First Hawaiian Bank and the Guam Banking Association. Thank you for joining us this week. I'm Nestor Licanto. We'll see you again next week on In Full Zoom.
Thanks.
Adios.
All right.
Take care.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.